From MTN, the Montana Television Network, this is Face the State.
Good morning and thanks for joining us for this edition of Face the State. I'm Shannon Newth. We're coming to you this morning from our studios of KRTV in Great Falls. It's been an incredibly difficult week for many in Montana, especially our law enforcement officers and their family and friends. In the early morning hours of Tuesday this past week, we lost Broadwater County Deputy Mason Moore in the line of duty, killed during a traffic stop near Three Forks. His death comes just one day after Peace Officers Memorial Day and during National Police Week. It's a time when law enforcement is honored for the sacrifice and commitment made daily to communities and people across the nation and Montana. This is a look at this year's 36th annual National Peace Officers Memorial Service that was held on the lawn of the U.S. Capitol. President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence both addressed the audience, and the names of law enforcement officers who died in the prior year were read aloud. According to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, since the first known line of duty death in 1791, more than 20,000 U.S. law enforcement officers have made the ultimate sacrifice. President John F. Kennedy signed a proclamation back in 1962 designating May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week as National Police Week to remember the fallen and honor those who serve. Now, Deputy Mason Moore was killed during a traffic stop Tuesday morning, prompting a middle-of-the-night chase across 5 southwestern Montana counties, during which the suspects fired shots at pursuing officers. The pursuit finally ended about 30 miles east of Missoula, with one of the suspects being shot and his father under arrest. That incident began when Broadwater County Sheriff Deputy Mason Moore pulled over a vehicle near Three Forks in what's being described as a routine stop at around 3 a.m. He had called the incident into dispatchers, but never called back. A Gallatin County Sheriff's deputy then responded and found the deputy dead on the side of the road. A statewide alert was issued for the suspect vehicle, and it was spotted near Anaconda, where a pursuit began. Authorities say the vehicle headed westbound on Interstate 90, where it struck spike strips in Powell County and was able to continue on the interstate. The suspects began firing at law enforcement before the vehicle stopped just east of Rock Creek. The driver was arrested just after 4:30 in the morning, while the passenger was taken to a Missoula hospital with a head injury. Now, one of the suspects in the case did die on Wednesday. The Missoula County Sheriff's Office says 38-year-old Marshall Barris has died as a result of a gunshot wound to the head sustained while being apprehended east of Missoula. Meanwhile, 61-year-old Lloyd Barris faces 16 felony counts, including 14 of attempted murder for the shootout with law enforcement prior to his arrest in Rock Creek. Barris says he shot at law enforcement because he wanted to be killed by police. Now, peace officers constantly train to meet threats, and Tuesday's shooting is a grim reminder of the dangers faced and the sacrifices law enforcement officers have to be prepared to make. MTN's Jacob Fewer continues the story.
I think it's got everybody in there.
Just inside the Montana Law Enforcement Academy is a place setting for Deputy Mason Moore. A reminder that he and all the others killed in the line of duty will always have a place at the table.
The importance of it is that we would never forget those folks that can't join us.
Now the task is preparing new officers for what lies ahead.
The bad person knows what they're going to do before the law enforcement officer does, so the training that we provide, one of the things we want to be able to do is have our students who are sworn law enforcement officers from agencies around the state be able to recognize risks and kind of reduce that reactionary gap.
To do that, the Academy puts officers in a 12-week program including mock traffic stops and building searches. Wednesday's training simulated a high-risk traffic stop where students needed to take a suspect into custody. Investigators say Deputy Moore was killed Tuesday morning performing a routine traffic stop. The law enforcement community is still recovering.
Our law enforcement students are people too, and like all of us, it takes some time to process tragic events such as this. But I think it helps ground them in the training. It helps them appreciate the families and things they do have.
In Helena, Jacob Fewer, MTN News.
Museum Deputy Mason Moore is the 129th Montana peace officer to be killed in the line of duty, the 5th since 2010. In August of 2014, Cascade County Deputy Joseph James Dunn was struck and killed by a vehicle being pursued near Belt In December of 2011, Blaine County Undersheriff Patrick Allen Pyatt died after being hit while directing traffic between Harlem and Chinook on Highway 2. In December of 2010, Montana Highway Patrol Trooper David DeLate was shot and killed outside of Three Forks during a traffic stop. And in February of that year, Missoula police officer Bob Heinold passed away from complications from a gunshot wound he received while on duty in 1998. Now, I'm joined this morning by three gentlemen who represent three different law enforcement agencies in Montana. And we have Chief Dave Bowen with the Great Falls Police Department, Undersheriff John Stevens with the Cascade County Sheriff's Office, and we have Captain Chad Dever with the Montana Highway Patrol. Thank you all for being here this morning.
Our privilege. All
right, so obviously a heavy week and a heavy time to be talking with all of you. First, let's talk about National Police Week. It's a time when the spotlight is on law enforcement, and in ways where we're remembering the fallen and we're also honoring those who currently serve. What is that like to have kind of an increased spotlight on you this week, both for recognizing your service but also remembering the fallen?
For us, it's nice to remember, the guys and gals we've lost. With the current national attitude, it's a good week to spotlight our people in a positive note instead of the negative.
Sure. Any other thoughts on that, gentlemen?
Well, certainly our thoughts and prayers are with the family of Deputy Moore and the law enforcement there in Broadwater County. And Montana's a large state, but as a law enforcement family, we're very close. And so a loss in Broadwater County is a loss in Cascade County, and really all across the state of Montana. Here in Great Falls, we conclude this week, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that as the program goes on, remembering the sacrifices of those that went before us, but also paying tribute to those that are doing the job currently. And so we conclude National Police Week on our Friday with a luncheon to remember that and celebrate those doing the job currently. So it's time to reflect, but also time to remember those who are currently out doing those jobs.
Sure. So, like I mentioned, you all work for three different agencies, and just to clarify what different duties are and how you all work together, maybe we can go down the line here and just say a little bit about what each agency entails, where you all work, and then we'll talk about how you all work together. So let's start first with Montana Highway Patrol.
Okay, again, I'm Captain Chad Dever with the Highway Patrol, and I'm the captain of District 2. Our state's divided into 8 districts, and District 2 is the district office is here in Great Falls, but we basically go to the Rocky Mountain front out towards Winnett and down to Rygate and Roundup, so we have a really large 8-county district.
Okay, and you're out on all of the highways, the rural roads, things like that.
Yes, ma'am, and our jurisdiction is the highways open to the public in Montana.
Okay, great. Then we narrow it down a little bit more to Cascade County.
Yeah, and basically we're the law enforcement for Cascade County. All types of law enforcement, traffic, all the way to homicides, whatever it would be. We also are the coroner for the county. So any deaths, whether it's in Great Falls or anywhere in the county, is also under our jurisdiction. And we have jurisdiction in the city as well, so if the city needs help, we definitely help them too. But I just wanted to say, we're 3 agencies, but when stuff happens, we're all on the same team, working together.
And then we narrow the focus down a little bit more to inside city limits.
Yes, so we're responsible for the municipality here in town. And we do have a little jurisdiction outside the city limits, but primarily we're focusing our enforcement efforts here in town. And the Sheriff's Office has outside of Great Falls, although the Undersheriff is right, we kind of help each other when need be, when calls are coming in quickly and there's seemingly not enough people out on the streets, we respond and help one another. So yeah, the 3-tiered response, we end up with the city limits.
And there'll be times when, I've gone to scenes of crashes, for example, and all 3 agencies will be on scene working together, whether that's one is running traffic, one's dealing with the investigation, one is helping escort somebody up to the jail, for example. So yeah, you all work together, and we've seen that. So let's talk a little bit more. You all mentioned that when something happens to one law enforcement agency or one officer, that impacts all of you across the state. That law enforcement really is one big family, if you think of it that way, across Montana. So how, let's start with you, Chief Bowen, how has the impact, the events of this last week with Deputy Mason Moore impacted. How have you seen it impact you personally and your officers at GFPD?
Sure. Well, personally, I reflect right back 23 years ago when Officer Shane Chadwick was killed on September 7th, 1994. And it was a friend of mine, a co-worker, and it doesn't seem like 23 years have passed, and when I hear of another law enforcement officer being killed, it takes me right back to that time. I can explain it only as a feeling of heaviness that comes on you. For our folks who weren't around at that time, our newer officers, I believe they have a heightened sense of awareness when they're out on the streets. Certainly, and the Undersheriff mentioned the national conversation. I think it's emboldened people who may have a bent against government and authority to act out. We recognize that the vast majority of the people that we police are law-abiding, good people, but there are those that don't respect authority. And so when it comes close to home, as it has in Broadwater County and a few years ago with Deputy Joe Dunn, those feelings are first and foremost in our mind.
Yeah, like the chief said, when we got the call Monday morning, we went right back to August of 2014. It was tough. It brought back those emotions. It was like you were there. It was instantly right back, and I guess that kind of surprised me a little, but it took you right back. And then, you know, you get up and shake it off, and the first thing we did was Sheriff Edwards and one of our lieutenants went to Townsend, because again, we were there. We felt it. It was sad that it's been fairly recent for us, but what can we do? Like you were saying, we all wear the badge. Men, women, it doesn't matter. You know, brothers, sisters, whatever. What can we do? That was instantly on our mind. Let's get down there. It's a tough time for Broadwater County, but let's pull it together and do what we can do.
Obviously, Montana Highway Patrol, it also hits close to home.
It does, and ironically, we lost Deputy Moore close to where Trooper DeLate was lost in December of 2010. I went over to that area to help with the calls, and that week after we lost David it was devastating. And like these gentlemen said, I mean, it's just hard to put into words, you know, the emotions you feel, and like the chief said, I mean, we have a lot of great people in our state, but once in a while, it's just that wake-up call that we can't get into a routine traffic stop or a routine call, because the reality is sometimes something devastating can happen, and there's people out there, there's some bad people out there that will take actions that result in something as tragic as this. It's just the reality that we face as law enforcement officers.
And you all have bands that you have over your badge. Tell me about that and the significance of that.
Sure, I'll talk about that. It's a way to visibly pay tribute to a fallen officer. I know when we put our bands on, people were asking me that hadn't heard, now why do you have that band on your badge? And so it's also an opportunity to explain to those folks, you know, one of our brothers or sisters has been killed in the line of duty, and to honor them. So it serves a couple of purposes: to pay tribute to them, and also to inform the public maybe that doesn't know and hasn't heard, give us an opportunity to explain to them.
Now, Undersheriff Stevens, you had brought up Joe Dunn. I went with Sheriff Edwards as well as two other deputies and the Dunn family, Robin, his wife, to Washington, D.C. If we can play some of that footage here from when Joe was honored. Now, he was killed in Cascade County, August 14th of 2014. I remember that day, and obviously I am not in law enforcement, but it was such a heavy time. Like I remember feeling, yeah, just a heaviness. It's really hard to describe. And like I said, I'm not in law enforcement, but those deaths are far-reaching and they impact a lot. And so we want to remember Joe and the Dunn family as well. And again, this is just a few short years ago when this happened. This video is from 2015 at the National Law Enforcement Memorial there, when Joe's name was added to the memorial there with thousands of other names of our law enforcement. I remember Sheriff Edwards had said when that happened, something that hit him was that since it hadn't happened to him since he had been in that position, it was hard to know even where to start, where to begin with dealing with that on a personal level for him, and also as the top-ranking official in his office, how to help other officers, deputies deal with that. How has he been reaching out? Has your office, you mentioned that he has gone down to Townsend, how has he been using his experience to help?
Yeah, and like I said, it's a sad thing that we have that experience, because as an administrator, that's the call you never want to get. It's been tough. It's brought back a lot of emotions for myself. Sheriff Edwards, you know, we've got together, and it's a tough day. Like you said, that feeling, it's tough. But like I said, we just get up and dust it off, and we were putting ourselves in Sheriff Meehan's position. What do we do now? And especially, you know, you're talking about an eight-person department. Yeah, they're lost. We've had a lot of conversations, and Sheriff's still down there doing whatever we can to do, because, you know, it's the little things as far as the, you know, who's going to take the call today or whatever, to the who's going to arrange the funeral, who's going to do that. So, like I said, as tough as Monday was for us, you know, is 10 times as tough on Sheriff Meehan and Broadwater County, and anything we could do. That was the big thing. Let us get down there. Let's get down to Townsend and just do what we got to do.
Within the Great Falls Police Department, there's Sergeant Rich Labard, who has spoke openly to many fellow officers. I've done a story with him in the past about his experience with PTSD and just living the life of a law enforcement officer. And I remember one thing that he said to me was that you never know basically what you're going to get on a day-to-day basis. You could respond to an armed robbery call and it can end very peacefully, or he gave me the example at the time of you can respond to a traffic stop and it can turn deadly, which we unfortunately saw this past week. So let's talk about the mindset that a law enforcement officer has to have going out on the streets every day. Even those routine traffic stops, you can never let your guard down, unfortunately.
And I think the chief hit on it a little bit. You say routine traffic stops. That's the mindset. There isn't routine anything. And that's the complacency you can't fall in. Everything's different. You know, a routine traffic stop is far from routine. As you know, sadly we found out.
Sure.
I would say, first of all, I want to appreciate Sergeant Labard for the work that he's done. He's come back to our department and helped many people, not just our agency, but other agencies cope with the cumulative stress and the effect that it can have on your people. It's kind of a double-edged sword. You train your people so that they're at a heightened sense of awareness in doing their duties while out on the street. However, that heightened sense of awareness takes a toll on you. And if you're not preparing and taking precautionary steps, it can have devastating effects, as we saw with Sergeant Labard, is how he's come back from that. And it's tough because you want to make sure that your folks are prepared every day, and yet you also recognize there's times when you have to come down from that, and you have to be prepared to deal with the mental stress that comes with it.
How about, you have such a large area that Montana Highway Patrol is covering. I imagine it's hard to know what you're getting into with any specific stop.
Excuse me. I think the important thing is you cannot look at it as anything routine, as the Undersheriff said. But the truth is, the majority of the time, most of our contacts with the public ended without an incident. And I think a real important thing that we all do is a lot of training. You have to always train to be on your toes and not get complacent when you are on your typical day-to-day activities, because as this grim reminder tells us, I mean, the result can be just devastating, but you just got to keep training, keep that mindset that something bad could always happen on the next stop or the next call.
Sure. So we look back over the last 5 years or so on a national level, things like Ferguson or Baltimore, those situations come up. We look locally, and unfortunately, we talk about we talk about a number of line of duty deaths here in the last 5 years, and incidents of having to use of force and things like that. Have you seen in your respective agencies, your respective calls that your officers go on, have you seen a change at all in how officers interact with the public, how the public is interacting with officers. Has that changed at all here on a Montana level?
I would have to say yes, on a couple levels. One, our number of felonious assaults up on our officers has increased over the last 3 years. The people that are more willing to want to fight and be resisting of arrest and acting out has increased, which results in injuries to officers. Again, we talked about the national conversation taking place has almost become anti-authority, you know, pushback against anything that represents itself as government. Again, the vast majority of folks are law-abiding. We love our community here. We're very supportive of us. But what has happened, I believe, is it has emboldened these pockets of folks that have this anti-government mentality. And we have seen an increase in resistance towards law enforcement, unfortunately. The second area that we've seen it have an impact is our low numbers of applicants. Because you have to ask, is this something that you want to do for a living? It's not an easy job. And in fact, if you look at it as a job, it's just that. This is a profession. This is almost a calling. And I would say for those of us that have spent years in this profession, we look at it as a calling. And so if you're coming in to get a good paycheck and some benefits, it's the wrong incentive. And so over the years, that has kind of dwindled away to low numbers of applicants. But before I leave that on a negative note, I want to say we will always find good applicants, because those people who want to serve the community and give back will always step up. So although it's a concern, we're still recruiting and finding good folks. But that's what I've seen here in Great Falls.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd agree with Dave. It's you know, we've all been doing this, I'm sure, over 20 years or not, and it's become a more violent on the streets. You know, with the assaults on officers. It seems the paradigm shift to violence, and yeah, the streets of Great Falls or Montana are not what they used to be. And again, with what Dave was saying, it's an excellent point about the candidates, the applications we get. From back in the day when we were all hired, you'd have a couple openings and you'd have 150 applicants putting in for it. Now we're lucky to get 30, 40. And it's just, again, for guys that have been around a while, you just look at that and shake your head. But, like Dave said, we're still going after, there's still people that want to be law enforcement and have the heart to do it, and that's who we're looking for.
You seeing anything different?
We are continuously recruiting people, but like the Undersheriff and Chief said, the same thing, we do find people that want an honorable profession, and there aren't a lot of jobs that are more honorable than law enforcement, and luckily we still have people that turn up and fill our positions, so we're lucky for that.
So I guess the question then is, how does that change? Do we get back? Do you see getting back to a point where you talk about when all of you were hired, or even just prior to 5 years ago, that the sense toward the kind of national feel in many ways has this kind of negative connotation around it for some? How do we change that? How do we go about fixing the rifts and strains that are coming?
Yeah, not to be cliche or anything, but we've got to go out there and you just do the right thing. There's bad apples everywhere, and that's a tragedy, but all we can do as administrators and tell our people, go out and do the right thing. That's the only way we're ever gonna change it, is if we can get everybody with that attitude and do what's right. Honor the badge.
I think some other steps that we can take is just what we're doing right here. We're just having a conversation with 3 of us that represent different agencies, talking about what law enforcement means to us, and that we're proud to serve our communities. We got into this, for me, 26 years ago. I love what I do for a living. And so the more we have conversation and bring our profession back out into the spotlight and celebrate the good things and the good work being done by our men and women out on the streets, I think that you're going to see that conversation begin to change. But unfortunately, we are in a little bit of a downward spiral at this point, but I'm positive to believe that the future can change.
What, for officers individually, and maybe this is just a question you answer from your own personal standpoint or as a representative of your organization, but as some of that has changed and some more negative connotations have come out, how do you then respond to that? Do you see that taking a toll on officers and how they want to do their jobs? Do you find yourselves being, maybe for a lack of a better term, more gun shy in responding to certain situations? How do you respond to that on a personal level, trying to do your job?
Yeah, I don't think you know, you get the training and you get that muscle memory, and you've got to go out there and just respond. The national attitude, all that, when you get in that car and put that badge on and you go respond, you cannot be thinking about that. You know what's right, you know what's wrong, and that's what you've got to stick with, is what's in your heart, and just go do your job.
I think appealing to those intrinsic values, why we got into this job, to do what we do. Don't let those external forces influence the way that you work, your belief system. Really appealing to those internal values of why we do what we do, I think helps our men and women develop that strong mindset to go, I understand what's going on, but that's not reflective of us, and I know what I'm doing.
If you do the right thing for the right reasons, which is a very popular quote in the patrol, you'll always be all right. No matter what the climate is nationally, this is an important job. It needs to be done. The people want us, and we do things to help people, and we should always be proud of that.
And we may have already answered this question, but what do you see as one of the biggest issues right now for law enforcement in Montana? Or concerns, problems, however you want to look at that?
I see a couple of things, but you know, the impact of illegal drugs in our communities is just taking a toll. Whether it's prescription drugs, you know, the opioid epidemic is alive and well. Unfortunately, we're seeing, of course, a continued influx of methamphetamine. I see what's going on in Colorado with the legalization of marijuana for recreational use. That concerns me a great deal, and so battling the drug front is always a concern. But I think continued relations with our community, finding ways to partner. Law enforcement is at the end of the chain, and we need partners in this. We can't be the answer. Everyone's got to be working together to solve some of these issues that are much greater than us.
Yeah, and I'd agree with what the chief's saying. Drugs is pushing, you know, a large percentage of the crimes going on, and we can't do it without the community. We can't do it ourselves. So, you know, the community policing, getting out there, talking, you know, we're human beings behind the badge. Let's have a conversation and try to fix the problem.
I feel personally that meth is devastating a lot of communities and people, and we, along with the sheriff and police departments, are stepping up our interdiction efforts to help combat that problem.
All right, and we have about a minute left, so just real quick answers. What do you think is a common misconception of your job? Let's start here.
I don't know if it's a misconception, and I think, like, when the chief sponsors the Coffee with the Cop, the importance that we, and it has been touched on today, when we get to talk to people, they realize that we're people just out there trying to serve the community, and I just think it's important that they always see that we're humans, and the loss of Deputy Moore is as devastating to us as anybody else. So they can imagine putting that together with the losses they've experienced in their lives, and it's just an overwhelming devastation to the whole community, because we're all brothers and sisters in law enforcement in Montana.
All right. Any other quick misconceptions you wanted to talk about?
No, what he was saying. I'm the same guy in uniform that I am out.
Sure.
So let's just have that conversation.
All humans.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, all three of you, for being willing to be here and have an open conversation and discussion. We appreciate it. And thank you for serving our community and our state.
Thank you.
This has been another edition of Face the State. I'm Shannon Newth. Have a great Sunday.
You've been watching Face the State, a presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network.